Welcome back to the Joseph Graham Show. Today I'm super excited. I met Bryce Prescott at my buddy Sean Finnegan's X Room, maybe about 2, 3 weeks ago. And we
Yeah.
just kind of talked a little bit, got to kind of know each other just a hair, but not much. So I'm like, I need to have him on the show. He has a lot of really cool people, but this is kind of like a get to know you type of thing, really, because we kind of just did super high level. So for people who are listening, who is Bryce Prescott? Who do you help? What do you do?
My underneath it all, I have a coach's heart. I've always been somebody that has been in a position to either train, to take complex ideas and make them simple, outlay them that way, and that's forced me to become excellent at communication and understanding things. And so, as it stands right now, my main company is called Big Picture Labs, and it was formerly known as Media Automated. I started in the podcast production and consulting space. And that opened up a bunch of opportunities for me to actually coach podcasters, help them become better at communicating, to be more entertaining behind the microphone. And then that opened up opportunities to actually consult with businesses and coach people. And then that led to an opportunity where I started up my own group called The Lab. And so I basically am just a coach is underneath it all. And how I apply that skill set depends on the needs of the people that I'm helping. And it's provided me a really rewarding life, fulfilling thing, and I feel like I'm in my zone. I love it.
No, I think that's great. So my first question is this. Were you always like an entrepreneur in business doing your own thing, or did you just get into the podcast space and that's how you started helping more people? Because you refer to yourself as a coach, but you also mentioned I had this business, and this business. So
Yeah, I've been terminally unemployable my entire life, which I guess is how you define an entrepreneur. I started and when I was a teenager, I was totally into the sales type of jobs. I wanted to make more money, and I didn't want to trade my time for money. I had a little bit of a stint where I worked in the ski industry for about 7 years, where I was at Deer Valley Resort I was the assistant manager of their rental operations on resort, at resort. And then I transitioned over to Snowbird after that for a couple years, doing where I was managing their rental operations. And in the meantime, I tried my hand at being a pro skier for a little bit. And I realized that those guys don't make any money unless you're at the really top of the heap. And I was married at the time. We had just had a baby. And ironically, there was this woman that I worked with who had this boyfriend that would come up to ski with us. And he was successfully had this brand new BMW. He always had nice clothes and the latest gear. And I was curious about what he did. And he was a mortgage officer. And this was back in the early 2000s, back in the Wild West days of mortgages. And so I asked him, what does that mean? What does it mean to be a mortgage officer? Because I didn't know. I had bought a home, but I didn't really understand the process. And he explained it to me. And I realized that was right up my wheelhouse as far as my skill set and the things I was good at. He introduced me to his boss, and I ended up becoming a mortgage officer after that. And that started me on a whole train of experiences that were in that entrepreneur space. Mortgages, real estate, those are the type of industries where you still have a system, a company that you report to, but in most cases, you're straight commission where you eat what you kill. And so I got used to that as an environment where I was totally fine with being responsible for all of my money, which, as you might understand it, there was some famine and there was some feast and there was some famine and there was some feast. And so here I am now, I'm 50 years old and I've done that cycle enough to where the dips aren't as low and the highs have gotten a little higher, and I'm totally okay with it. So the answer to your question, yes, entrepreneur at heart underneath it all. I don't like working for other people, not because I don't work well with others. I really do enjoy camaraderie and team building and things. It's just that I'm fine with that pressure. I don't have any adversity to being the guy on the hook for the results.
yeah. When I think that what I've noticed with a lot of high achievers, highly successful salespeople, entrepreneurs, they have the ability to go and handle the pressure and the risk. So I want to talk about that first because I don't think too many people talk about it as much. How did you develop that risk tolerance? Did you have that ability inside of you? Because you said famine and feast, and I've been in sales over 20 years. I've been training sales teams for about 3 to 4. And a lot of times I think people get to that place where they have to kind of grow and learn how to kill to eat, like you mentioned, and it takes time to build a pipeline and all. How did you build the resilience to do that?
There was a few key experiences that led to that. One of them was just a little bit of backstory about me. So in a former life, I was a Mormon, and served a Mormon mission, meaning I went to another country to be one of those guys in the white shirts with the tags that talk to people about the Book of Mormon and Jesus.
Mm.
But when I came home, I went straight to Brigham Young University in Provo, Utah. And one of the first opportunities that I got to work was to sell vacuum cleaners. There was a vacuum cleaner type called the Fairfax. It was a competitor to the Rainbow Vac.
Mhm.
And I went through this entire sales process of learning how to present, the whole workup, the objections piece, the whole thing. And having come off a mission, which is basically a sales job too, I'm out there selling
Yep,
Jesus
yep.
at some point. I started to enjoy this, but I wasn't successful at it. I had a really hard time closing. And when I would have reviews with my manager and the boss and even the owner of the company, they would scratch their head and go like, dude, I don't get it. Like, your process is flawless. And then you just fall off a cliff at the end, man. Like, you can't grab the money. Like, what is the issue? And so I realized one of the things is that was, I think, the first time I realized there were things that I didn't know that I didn't know. So I was unaware of some mindset type stuff that was holding me back from winning, and worthiness stuff, and that whole kind of screw your head off type of rewiring your mind type thing. So that was one of the first things, is I realized, okay, I can learn all the mechanics of how to sell and what to say and how to present. That doesn't mean I'd be any good at it unless I buy in a different way than I had been. So there was that. Then when I left the ski industry, it was because my wife and I at the time had just had our first child, and I went into the mortgage industry. And to get that job for the mortgage at the mortgage company, it was they kind of set me up in a way, and I'm glad they did it this way. So I had this really arduous process of getting my first appointment with the owner. This gentleman, the boyfriend of the woman that I had referenced, said, "Here's my boss's number, give him a call. He's looking forward to your call. Give him a ring." So I called him several times, left him several messages, and he didn't respond back.
Mm-hmm.
And on the last time I did, he returned my call, and I came to find out that that was a part of his whole process. Like, he wanted to see how willing I was to follow up, how my tone changed through the messages, if I was willing to just keep pushing through. Well, they brought me in for that first interview, and it was a 4-hour-long interview where at the time I went to this building and they had this whole team of call center guys, and they had a predictive dialer. And he goes, "Look, I want you on the phones tonight. I want to see how you're going to do. Here's my call center manager." And I meet with this young man who was just this little whippersnapper in his early 20s. And I was close to 28 years old at that time. And he tells me the whole process of, we're going to call these people. These are the questions in the script to use. This is how it's going to work. Let me know how it goes. Well, at the end of that 4 hours, I had created 9 leads where I'd had it to where I would talk to people. They were interested in what we had to say. I understood the script. I listened. I understood from all of my other experiences that if you don't listen to what people are actually telling you, you're never going to be able to solve the problem that they actually have, because you're going to be unaware of it. And I met up with the boss at the end of it. And he goes, "So how did you do?" And I go, "I think I did okay. I got 9 leads." He's like, "Oh, 9 leads. Okay." And he was really just low energy, sort of like, I didn't know if I disappointed him. I didn't know what was going on. And he goes, "Well, let me tell you something." He's like, "I've ran this company for 8 years, and our most seasoned call centers have never gotten 9 leads in one night. You came in on day 1 and got 9. And he goes, "I got plans for you." He immediately hired me, and he made me the team lead in 2 weeks over all these loan officers that were there for years, right? Like, I ruffled a bunch of feathers. And it wasn't that I thought that I was some sharp guy. I just did what I thought I was supposed to do and listened and did well. And getting into that was an interesting thing too, because now all of a sudden I was leading a team, which meant I got overrides from what they closed on their loans. And then I was responsible, of course, for my own production using the system that he had required, where we would get these leads from the call center. And that was when I got my first real taste of like a jump up in my income. When I was in the ski industry, I never made more than like 30 grand a year. And that first year in loans, I, quadrupled that. And I wasn't even scratching the surface because I was on a really restrictive commission structure at that time. Like, I wasn't even getting all the money that I was could have, because of how I was being paid these, regular payments and everything. And so with those two things, I started to realize something that it was when my mind shift changed, and I started realizing how much control I actually had over that. And something in me changed where I was just like, I can't go back. I don't know how to go back to punch a clock and to have that internal dialogue where no matter my income, no matter my output, my income will stay the same.
Yeah.
Like that was just unexcusable to me. I'm like, how can you live that way? It just, my constitution was like, I can't do that. I need to have the upside. Like I'm fine to eat shit if I have to, but I want the peak if I'm going to be that good. And that basically is what started there. The mortgage industry, when it crashed in 2008, I got out of that and I took my knowledge and experiences there and I got into global commodities. And then after that, I didn't get into global commodities. I transitioned from mortgages into buying and selling post-foreclosed real estate for several years. When that dried up, I got into global commodities. And then when that shifted, I got into the podcasting game because I wanted to meet other people without having to pay them. Like I wanted to have opportunities to have conversations like this without having to stroke a check. And I was good at it. And then that transitioned to where I became somewhat known in that space as somebody that could give good advice. I started charging to produce other people's episodes. I got big enough to where I had to hire my first engineer and then my second team member. And then those opportunities produced coaching opportunities. And, here we are all these years later, and it's just been an evolution.
Yeah.
I've had many pivots during that time where I've had to change direction and whatnot, but underneath it all, I think that it was a gradual sort of shift in my mindset that allowed me to be comfortable with that. And I will say this, in my first marriage, I've been married twice. My first marriage, my wife at the time had a corporate job. So I did have a little bit of a safety net in that if I didn't come home for something, it wasn't like I was eating ramen. My family was okay. She had money that came from that. And so it wasn't a lot of money, but it was enough to where I wasn't some single guy on my own that was going to have to couch surf if I didn't do it right. So I have to acknowledge that did help me in the comfort of being willing to be in that space. But now as I'm transitioning into a new phase of my life as well, I got no problem with that. Like I will figure it out. Like just give me opportunities. I'm good at networking. I love connecting with people. I understand very simply that sales and entrepreneurship is just simply solving problems. And the better you are at understanding what problems people have, communicating that you understanding the solution to those problems to people that need the solution, and then making that connection, that it all works out.
Yeah. No, I love that. You said a few different things that were just like jumping out at me. Like in the call center, we're going to go back there. You're like, I listened to what the problem was, then I formulated it so that I could help them solve a problem. When I teach sales, I'm always teaching about solving the problem because the money comes in. I'm not even talking about selling people most of the time. That's why since I was 28, I've been in sales or doing something with sales because I don't want a cap on my thing. I always do recommend this to people. What is your risk tolerance? If you can't just go balls to the walls, do it 100% right now, start with the sales job. See if you can actually kill the eat to begin with. But you said a couple of different things. One, you better bet on yourself. You took the risks. Two, you did have, at least you knew you were not going to eat ramen. You might be eating macaroni and cheese and hot dogs a couple of nights a week, but you calculated risk. And I think the problem is that today there's so many people online saying you got to go all in on your business, but they haven't shown you the path or the last 15, 20 years where like you didn't just start in business, you started in sales and you learned the skill set that you needed so that you could be successful in business. How do you think that affects with I call it the fake Lambo age, where like we were just at a really cool event with Sean. They had some really cool cars and those people actually own those cars. That's a different game. But with the people that rent the fake Lambos and try to act a certain way and sell you the course, how do you help people navigate what they truly want to do? Or is that not even a group that you deal with?
Well, if I understand your question, I've dealt with both aspects of that, but to me, it's more of a personal thing. I've noticed that, for example, I don't have a Ferrari anymore, but I've owned a Ferrari in the past and I've had extremely nice cars and they come with their own liabilities and their own challenges to have that. And ironically, I remember as an example, I did a photo shoot with my Ferrari to use for marketing purposes. And I was accused of renting it. I was accused that it wasn't mine, that like you're just trying to be internet rich and this whole thing. And I'm like, what? Like, no, this was my dream car. I earned this. This was something that was very important to me. And so a lot of the tone out there about that whole world, I recognize is a lot of projection.
Yep.
And that sometimes the jealousy is a real thing, but also there are those that prey upon the other side of it that are impressed by things like that will unnecessarily allow people to overlook things that they shouldn't be overlooking relative to the course they're going to buy or the results of the person that's trying to make you think that they know what they're talking about. And so when it comes to the people that I work with, that to me is nothing more than a symptom. So I'm looking at, well, what is the thing that's causing the problem? Like what underneath the surface is making it to where you feel, because sometimes I'll meet people that they want that perfect shiny marketing, the perfect funnel, the perfect copy, the whatever, but then what they're actually selling lacks substance. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, to them, I go, that's the problem. Like that you are putting yourself in a position to be out of alignment, out of integrity, and possibly in trouble by selling something better than it needs to be sold. Right. I would put that resource into the development of the product before you get really, really great at marketing. And I feel somewhat vindicated right now because right now in this age of AI, where the barrier of entry to have the perfect funnel and the perfect images and everything is so easy because AI can create it all for you, that now we're seeing that like real substantive, powerful consultants and coaches and people that do that, they're rising to the top because what they are good at can stand the weight of scrutiny. Mm-hmm. And so again, if I understand your question accurately, to me, I look at that stuff as like, well, that's a symptom. What's behind it? I don't find myself appealed to that stuff at all. Like when I see really fancy cars and marketing and watches and all that stuff, my first thought is good for you, bro. But it doesn't impress me in the same way as it did. As somebody that has owned those higher end items of luxury, I recognize a very simple truth. A Ferrari is an amazing thing until it's just your car 6 months later.
Yep.
And you're like, man, my car's dirty. Oh my gosh, I got to get it registered again. The windshield cracked. Crap. Like it becomes this normal thing. Like once you achieve something, we are perpetually in this place where we have to continually be working towards something. And it's kind of like that example of the dog at the dog track. If he ever catches the rabbit, he's done. Like he will never race again. Yeah. And so my perception of those things, for me, where I find myself most like, ooh, I want to know how to do that, is things like high-level recurring databases that give you a certain like nut every month because you've created a community that buys on a regular basis. I started my own coaching community. I call it the lab. It's a group coaching experience. And so every month there's things that come in. And the more that builds and grows, the more at peace I am about, okay, so like this is a lasting sort of thing. I show up, I provide value, it attracts more people. There's only an upsell for this or an upswing for this, provided I maintain being this valuable person for these individuals. And so that puts responsibility on me to continue to show up. So, I love all that stuff. I love fancy houses and cars and private planes and all that. I also have understood the game long enough to know how easy it is to fake it. And so I look at the substance of that. I've met people that are some of the most talented, powerful entrepreneurs that you would never guess because they don't dress it. I've also met some of the most vapid, morally bankrupt people that have all the nice stuff. But I've also met the inverse, to be clear. I've met the guy that's got all the cars, flies privates, got the big fancy house, and he's one of the sharpest, kindest, most incredible people I've ever met that I would give him all my money to have him teach me how he does what he does. Yep. And then I've also met the people that feign this sort of virtue of not having anything, even though they have a lot of money, that are gross people that I would never want to associate with anyway. Mm-hmm. So the example to me back then is, and right now, is to really pay attention to things like your intuition, your gut, be willing to step outside of a sales process if your ticker's off, if you're feeling something, like don't give into the pressure of the needing to make a decision now, which I know a lot of sales guys, like they don't like hearing that because, the statistics of somebody stepping out of the process and never coming back in is very, very high. Like once they leave that moment, it's really hard to get them back. But then again, if that's the case, that means that it probably wasn't an ideal fit for them anyway, and you don't want them as a client as it is. So I've said a lot, and I hope I answered your question. When it comes to the expressions of wealth and some of the faux success that's out there, I've gotten to the point where I can just see through it now. Like I can tell the difference nowadays from just my own experiences, and I'm really good at reading people. Like I've done, like stand-up comedy has been a hobby of mine for the last 8 years. I've headlined as a comedian all over the Western United States. I've met and performed with some of the biggest names in comedy. And learning how to read a room is something that I developed in comedy, and learning how to handle silence and how to let people show themselves through communication that way and to give them space to do that. And so that's helped me to really know when I meet people, oh, this is a real guy.
Yeah.
or there's something fishy about this dude. I'm gonna sit back and wait.
Mhm. No, I loved what you said on a lot of that stuff because I teach a lot of times in sales follow up and dealing with when you're dealing with really big companies, it's not a one call close anyway. It normally is because there's different personas, different people that are there. And then just with meeting famous people, like I'll throw money down on trips all day long. I've just never been into cars. I think it's cool for people to have cars. It's just never been my thing.
Sure.
Like my dream car would probably be like a truck. But like I'm just in like I don't care, like that's not my thing. But
Sure.
like I'm going to New Zealand next year and I'm going to spend a lot of money going to New Zealand because I want to go do it. I think it's just finding genuine, true people that really, and I think it's at every level, honestly. Like I've met some very wealthy people, like you've mentioned, that are phenomenal and they have some flashy stuff. And I met some other people that are phenomenal. They don't have flashy stuff, but it's the person. How did you develop the instinct to walk away from deals? Because I know I've let clients go when they've not felt right, or I won't buy something if I feel the pressure because, again, I've been in the sales game long enough that my wife does get mad at me at this. Like if I'm somewhere and someone's doing a sales trick, like, they have the little gimmicks and stuff, I'll call it out on them just for fun. And
Yeah.
she's like, oh. And the guy's like, I'm like, yeah, I do this for a living. Just tell me what the price is. Like, if I go to a place and like, I'll use a car dealership real quick. If I go to a place and they have to talk to their manager or something, I won't talk to the sales guy anymore. I'm just going to talk to the manager. This is the person that has control. I know I went on a little rabbit trail there, but I think the perception and reality are different. So how can people figure that out if maybe they haven't developed that skill as much? Maybe they're younger because a lot of people that listen to this show are sales professionals or first time entrepreneurs, and maybe they don't have the same experiences we've had so far, Bryce.
Well, it's the answer to that is actually more personal than you might think, in that you got to get to know yourself first. I think that a big chunk of my life where I made the wrong decisions and pursued the wrong things was that I was trying to fill something inside of myself that was never going to be filled with something external. And it was that I needed to get to know who I am and what makes me tick, and more importantly, be okay with it. There's a wonderful book called The Dark Side of the Light Chasers by a woman named Debbie Ford. And it talks about our darkness and about us being honest with ourselves about the things that we might be ashamed of that are dark parts of us: jealousy, pettiness, anger, hatred, like those darker emotions, and understanding how to embrace who we actually are without giving into the basest parts of it, and coming to peace with that allows us to have a sense of wholeness.
Mhm.
And in the book, she uses an example of like as a child, we're introduced to that our lives are like a home, and we have these rooms of our homes, and in one room is anger, and one room is lust, and one room is all these darker emotions and experiences, and we learn to keep those doors locked to where all of a sudden we only have access to 3 rooms in the house, but yet all this stuff is living in there.
Mhm.
And we're paying the power on all those things, and we've got to handle all of that, and that we need to open those doors back up and make peace with that. And that's the only way that you can release that. And so until a person does that, they're going to have a hard time recognizing the same in other people.
Mhm.
One of the things that as well I've noticed is, I've done some things in my life that I'm not proud of. And, as an example, when I was in my mortgage business, when I was doing the post foreclosed sales, like my partner and I, we got in some trouble with the state of Utah SEC for some miswording on contracts where we're used, and where we were accused of selling securities and being unlicensed registrars. And it was a big thing with the state, and there was a high profile court case about it. And I was thoroughly embarrassed about it, and I wanted to hide that. I didn't want people to know that. And then I started meeting really high level, powerful people, and they had their own versions of getting lumps.
Mhm.
I've been bankrupt. I used to be so embarrassed about the idea that I couldn't hold on to what I was doing, and that was something that I needed to use as a way to restart. And at this point, I'm like, no, that's a tool that's a part of our government that allows us at a certain point of failure to not be burdened by it the rest of our lives.
Mhm.
Other options, other things where like I've made mistakes, and instead of being somebody that hides from those things or tries to act like it doesn't, I just openly say it. I firmly believe that the freest man in the room is the one with nothing to hide.
Mhm.
And so what that's done is it's helped me in the interface with other people to sniff out where I know, oh, you're lying about something. There's something that you're hiding. I can feel the difference because of the work that I've done inside of myself to have that be a discernible like thing in the air that I can notice. So for young people, I would say you need to get to know yourself first. Like you get to be really honest about what your desires are, your fears, the things you don't want anybody to know, the things that you would be deathly afraid of the public finding out. Make peace with those things. And that will give you a sense of self that will actually help in the decisions that you make the decisions that you make respective to who you allow into your life, who you hire, who you seek mentorship from, who you get advice from. Once you get to that point, your picker gets really sensitive and you can be like, no, that guy's full of shit, dude. Like I don't need to associate with that. And it's a very real thing. There's another amazing book called Power versus Force, where it reads like stereo instructions. It's a boring read, but the point of it is that he energetically was measuring experiences and emotions so that you could have there be a frequency associated with anger, a frequency associated with, sadness, with love, with gratitude. And there is a scale as far as the lower vibrating frequencies and the higher vibrating frequencies. And the highest vibrating frequency is that of authenticity, which means what you say, think, and do is all the same. So that means that because we are vibrating all the time as energetic beings, when you are around somebody that's authentic, you will feel it immediately. There will be a connection there, but you can only tap into that if you've noticed where you are authentic and where you are telling yourself the truth. A lot of times that's really hard to do. So my advice to the younger generation is make peace with being truthful. Like sometimes, for whatever reason, our culture doesn't reward truth. We like to hide it. We like to gaslight it. We like to reframe things to where it makes it seem that we're always the victim of something instead of the creator of it. And it's not a helpful way to live. Truly successful people reject that. They understand that they have absolute control in the world that they're creating for themselves. And so the younger generation, the sooner they understand that, the more easier it will be for them to get to that place where they're making less mistakes through association.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I have two thoughts now. So I'm going to ask you one question, then I'm going to come back to the other one. Okay. Tim Grover talks about the dark side as well, but he talks about it using it as fuel. It sounds like in this book, you're more facing it to accept that it's there, but not use it as fuel. Am I hearing you correctly on that or?
No. So I appreciate that distinction because I'm a big fan of Tim Grover. I've met him several times. The way that I understand what Tim Grover talks about is the same way that I would look at like nitrous fuel in a car. Like, so it's a motivator. It's something that you can tap into, use as a source to propel you towards something. But if you overuse it, it will burn you out.
Yeah.
And we've seen that in, Michael Jordan is one of his biggest test cases as far as what he's done. Well, as revered as Michael Jordan is as the greatest basketball player of all time and his undeniable winning streak, he's kind of a shit show as a person. Like he's very petty. He doesn't have a lot of close friends. He's got issues because he's too much in that darkness for the sake of selfishness. Now, depending on where you're at in the spectrum of perception, you either excuse that and like it because you're not having to deal with Michael Jordan on a day-to-day basis as somebody in his life, and you can appreciate what he's accomplished professionally. But I would prefer to have it be somewhere different. So when it comes to that, that's how I interpret Tim Grover's stuff about the darkness. What I'm referring to here is just the honesty required to say, it's like, so for example, I find myself in certain situations where I feel really petty, or like I'll feel slighted, something will happen, some schmuck that is an idiot that I can't believe this guy is doing what he's doing will do something that pisses me off, and then he'll try to throw me under the bus or involve me in something, and I will have these feelings like, go fuck yourself, dude. And I'll have these like really like, God damn it. And instead of like internally shaming or acting like that's not a thing, I'll just lean into that for 5 seconds. Like, yeah, I'm feeling this. And then I usually get my wits back about me. Like, that's not helpful. You're not going to do anything about it. Just go away. And I could process through it, being honest in the moment, not having it affect me in a way that would cause me to do something petty. Experiencing pettiness versus being petty and doing something are two different things. So in that distinction, when it talks about the darkness, respective to Debbie Ford's book, that's what I'm talking about. Every single person listening to this podcast has something they're ashamed of. Every single person has something they wish they could change. Not understanding that by gaslighting yourself into ignoring that is at your peril. That when you can embrace it and use it differently, as an example, you look at, I'm a big NBA fan. You look at, teams like the Golden State Warriors, and they had Draymond Green, who's an agitator. He's a pain in the ass, but he's a necessary part of their championships that he's won. He's the guy that handles a bunch of the crap that sets the tone in ways that Steph wouldn't, or Klay Thompson wouldn't, and when Kevin Durant was on that team wouldn't. Same thing with guys like Dennis Rodman, Patrick Beverley. These guys are agitators. Each of us, we have a version of that in our, personalities that we have inside of us. And instead of ostracizing that guy, I'm going to use him when I need to, but I'm going to keep him in check, but I'm going to use him for my benefit. And that's what I mean by the difference with those two things. So I appreciate the clarification.
Yeah, no, and I love that because, again, I've read Grover and I understood it, but also reading the people that he trained, it was like, it's almost like the 48 Laws of Power. I can only read that stuff for so long because I am not personally wanting to get into mental manipulation or yes, I can do the things I need to do, but once you get into that dark psychology a little bit too much, for me, it's just not my forte. I'm just, like you mentioned, I'm maybe who I am.
Okay, so let me, I love that you brought that up. Let me present an idea to you that I think would be a fun conversation to have. So, Jordan Peterson talks about how the most dangerous man is a one to which knows the depths of his capacity for ill and doesn't do anything about it. Keeps it in control and in check. A domesticated animal is not dangerous. It's a wolf that you've turned into somebody that can act because he knows what he can do. So when I look at books like 48 Laws of Power, I find myself interested in it just from what does that mean about me? And then from that point, it's like, I see it from a defensive place. So if I know somebody can use this tactic on me as I read about it, it helps me be in a position where I could use it if I needed to. I'm choosing not to, but I'm more able to defend against somebody else using it against me.
Yeah, no, I love that because I do, I've read the book and I know it. I'm just saying, when I read it at first, I'm like, oh, I could use this. And then I'm like, oh, that doesn't feel congruent to who I am. So I'm not going to use it. But I do see it coming, kind of like the Art of War. I know what they're going to play, but I'm not going to do that, maybe that one of the aspects because it didn't feel right for me. So no, I love your clarification. I love Jordan Peterson. I think also, though, sometimes it's having to face your dark side is not easy. And I've done it. I've gone through and I keep doing it and I keep putting myself in those situations. But sometimes it's how far down that rabbit hole would I actually really go? And if I'm thinking of my kids, if someone hurt my kids, I can go extremely far, extremely far. But if it's something like you mentioned, the asshole that's just annoying me. Yeah, I might talk to myself in my head that guy's stupid, whatever, but I'm not going to act on it. I'm going to address the issue. I'm going to register that it's a feeling I'm really having. And then I'm okay, cool. I'm over it. I'm going to let it go. So no, I agree with you there. I love Peterson. Peterson's one of my favorite people to follow. I think the problem is that in society today, we've almost made masculinity too weak. Not almost, we have. It's just, it's like if true, genuine masculine has to have a danger to it. Because if it doesn't, then it's nothing. If it's not really masculine.
Well, let me present this as an idea to add to that. So I don't think that the perception is it's become weak because we've redefined the specifics of what the priorities are. In a masculine society, accountability is a key part of the rules of the society. If you do something, you have to have a rule of law, so to speak, where if there's something that's broken, there's a consequence for you. And that's what keeps the demons in check, so to speak, because there's a strict confidence. We've moved into a society where feelings are starting to trump that, to where somebody can do something that is a law-breaking thing or is bad, but they're a good person and they did it for a good reason and we feel bad for them now. And so we weaken through instead of being justice, we go to mercy. And when you do that at scale, what happens is you get a demonized masculinity that makes it seem like if you hold somebody to account that you're toxic, or that the idea of having strict rules that don't care about your feelings are uncaring. And I say this carefully, but it's kind of the feminization of society. It's where we're in this place where the feminine energies are taking over as opposed to the rigidity of the masculine energies. And the unfortunate part about that is, in order for true femininity to thrive, it requires the box that masculinity creates. Because femininity and an energy, I'm not saying that women, I'm saying just the feminine energies are chaotic and they're sensual and they move around and they're very fluid, where masculine is rigid and it's something where there's boundary. And so when you have the boundary of masculinity, and then inside of that, the femininity can bounce around and be sensual, you have something that's really powerful, really passionate, and really incredible. But when those walls of that box start to cave because the men aren't holding to their frame and holding to their boundaries, then you have the femininity running amok and they start to become masculine in that way. And that's what we're seeing now, is that there's so much blame being assessed for something that isn't the real thing to blame. But in order to really get to the bottom of it, it would take people having to recognize that we aren't being accountable for what's actually happening. And there needs to be a reckoning, and that reckoning is going to hurt.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think so many times people get caught up in their emotions or in their feelings. And like you said, femininity and masculinity can flow in both male and female. That's not a distinct thing. Everyone has different levels of it.
Sure.
But I think society goes to the extreme too much. It will like go, okay, well, we're going to be super rigid or we're going to be super loose. And I think that's the problem that most people are functioning with right now. Most young men don't know what it is to be a man. There's too much fatherlessness in our nation, whether it was set up by society or whatever, and accountability is one of the key paths back. I mean, how do we get back to that besides having conversations like this, I guess? Like, as a nation as a whole, how can we even get back to having a set standard of accountability, but still allowing the fluid motion of the femininity, for lack of better ways to say it, to flow together? How do you have any thoughts on that? I know that's kind of like a bigger question, but
no, but it's an appropriate question, and I think that there's an appropriate response. In my perspective, I think that what has been missing, there's a wonderful book called Tribes by Sebastian Junger, and he basically studied with these tribes in another part of the world, and he was watching the hierarchies and how they worked and the whole thing. And he was translating that into like what we're missing in Western culture. And the short version is that basically, and this is my take on it, that as men, we lack brotherhood. That we lean too much on our spouses to be our best friends instead of brothers. We don't actively have places where we compete one to another as men. Where in the past, when there was more of a segregation of, well, this is my tribe of brothers, we're going to go hunt, we're going to go do this, you would go out with the men and you would compete one with another. There was a hierarchy, there was ribbing, there was an association there that allowed you to really let it down, to be fully yourself. It was with the boys, and you guys loved each other and you supported each other, and it was something that was really powerful, and it filled your cup, and then you would go home able to lead and to set a standard and a boundary because you had the support of your brotherhood. So right now, I think that's one of the reasons why we're seeing a lot of that kind of pop up in some of these men's coaching and things, is these concepts of brotherhoods. And whether or not they're worthwhile is to be determined specific to each one, because some of them are great and some of them aren't. But I think that's one thing that's missing. I was a part of a group of men several years ago where it was a more affluent group, but once a month we would fly out to Laguna Beach and we would meet at the leader of its house, and we would go down to the beach and play spike ball. We'd take a weekend. We'd fly in, we'd go play spike ball, we'd get together, we'd have these journal things we would do. We would have a breathwork session together where a facilitator would come in, we'd go out to dinner, we'd have a party, we'd go to Newport, we'd go-kart racing, we would compete, we would laugh. It was just a group of dudes. And then we would go back to our businesses and our families with our cups full, with a team of brothers that we really, really loved. And I think that more men need that. Now, the idea of flying into a different city or whatever, that's not required. It's like, I think that men in general lack companionship from other men. They don't have good friends anymore. The society through Zoom and things, we just don't. And I think that's an issue. I think there's a huge opportunity for us to do that. And I had a coach at one point, I still have one, but there was one that I was this specific when I was talking to him, like how I wanted more of that, because I really enjoyed the brotherhood that I had with those guys in California. And he said, well, whatever you need, build. So if you feel like you need a brotherhood, go build a brotherhood. Like, involve people in your life, allow them to be somebody that you do that, you be the leader of that. And what it required of me was to level up and to lead and to be the guy that organized the get-togethers and to be the guy that did the thing. Same with, my style of coaching. I never found a coach that really vibed in the way that I wanted. It's like, well, be that. Because if you're having that experience, somebody else is, and it's allowed me to attract in a certain type of person that really meshes with my style, and we can really do some amazing things together. Same with relationships, same with everything. Be the thing that you want. But back to your original question, as far as like what men need, I think that we need to focus more on camaraderie and friendship amongst men and have that be something that we can let our guard down, be truly ourselves with, and then with cups full, come home and lead our families after the fact.
Yeah. No, I think you nailed it, because like I have friends here in Phoenix that I'll go and say, hey, I want to get a coffee. I'm a coffee guy, so that's my thing. Or I want to get a cigar or whatever. And I can go and spend time with them. And I think for thousands of years, that's what we did. And now in this society, we don't get to actually just be men. And then when, like you said, this is something, and this is going to be hard for a lot of people to hear. We try to rely on our spouse to fill a void that she was never meant to fill. And then that makes that tension and stuff in the marriage not good, because she's not going to relate that same way. Like women are good at that. They have their own different things there. So I highly agree with that. We're not done, but where can people find you? I know we've been talking about a lot of stuff, so I always like to put it kind of in the middle.
Sure. It's pretty simple. Just my name, bryceprescott.com. I've got my offers for my group coaching there. I've got stuff about my media production, what I do for podcasters. I've got all my social media links there. And so that's kind of the hub of everywhere you can find me. And on most of my socials, it's my name or my name official, just like at Bryce Prescott on Instagram. But all those links, just bryceprescott.com. Super easy.
Awesome. No, I love it. And we'll drop that in the show notes as well. The other thing I wanted to go into, because you said it, when you see a problem, when something starts to bug you, it may be that you're supposed to build the path for it. Like you mentioned that with coaching, you mentioned that with podcasting, you mentioned that with Brotherhood. If that's something that you train people when you're doing your coaching, kind of like, hey, this is a key indicator if this is a problem that's bugging you that you maybe should develop something for it, or
indirectly, yes. Like one of the tenets of what I teach. So a majority of what I coach on, whether it be in media, in voice, authority, podcast, my group, The Lab, my podcast, The Lab, it's based in a lot of the principles of neuro-linguistic programming, which is basically the dance between the conscious and the subconscious mind. For those of you that don't know, neuro-linguistic programming, neuro is the brain, linguistic, how you communicate, programming, the way that you create habits and patterns in your mind. So it's a belief and a truth of mine that life is a mirror. And so if I'm experiencing something that's uncomfortable, instead of attaching a meaning to that discomfort, I choose to look at it as a signal that this discomfort is showing me something to which I get to level up with. I get to be better at. If I was in a higher capacity in my skill sets, in my network, in my reputation, in my money, in whatever, I wouldn't be experiencing this level of discomfort. And so that means that is an invitation then. So as far as roundaboutly, yes, if somebody is experiencing something where they have discomfort or they're having a result they don't like, the signal is the emotion of discomfort, of disapproval, of pain. And that's showing them, hey, go here. Mm-hmm. It's like a TPMS monitor in your car. When that thing pops up, you know, oh, I need to put air in my tires. When you have a negative emotion, oh, I need to address what's causing this negative emotion. And the cause of the emotion isn't external, it's internal. It's something to which your, like I said, your skills, your reputation, your resources, your ability, like you got to level up at some level to make it so that you can handle that. And the beautiful part is that when you pair that with a strict and detailed vision of exactly what you want out of your life, you'll start to realize the velocity increases on you getting what you want out of your life, because every moment of discomfort is pointing you back to you aren't ready to handle the thing you want. The future version of yourself that has the goal that you reach, that has the life that you want, he's demanding things of you right now. And that's why you feel painful. That's why you feel discomfort. Not that you're weak, but that it's an invitation to become a higher capacity person in those 5 areas. It's funny because I read that book, The Diary of a CEO by Steve Bartlett, and he talks about those 5 pillars. And I've been looking at those things for a long time. Like those are key indicators of legitimate ways that we can focus on making things better for ourselves. We can increase our skill set. We can increase our capacity. We can increase our reputation. We can increase our ability to connect with people and to have a network. And there's beauty in that, because when men are people in general, but I'll use the word men specifically, when we are in pursuit of something worthwhile, it fills us up. Mm-hmm. In entrepreneurship and investing, they talk about how cash flow is king, that you want to create cash flow, that cash flow is this thing that gets you through the lulls. In my opinion, the emotional version of cash flow is momentum. That when you can feel and have momentum happening all the time, it covers a bunch of sins. It keeps you out of being depressed. It gives you something to focus on. It gives you a reason for the discomfort so that you're able then to, in that moment of not being comfortable, be like, okay, so this is what it means. And it's not because you did anything wrong. It's because you are reaching for yourself to be better. You know, when you go into a gym, as an example, a 45-pound plate weighs the same if you're a 7-year-old or whether you're a 40-year-old. Mm-hmm. It's the capacity to lift that amount of weight that is in question. Same with life. You want to be a multimillionaire? That's a 45-pound plate. If you're acting like you're a 7-year-old and you haven't learned the things that make it strong enough for you to lift that up, it's going to hurt and it will crush you if you actually were to try to lift it. Mm-hmm. And inversely, when you're ready, you can lift many of those plates at the same time. So kind of back to the whole thing. Yes, life is a mirror. It will show you the areas to which you get to focus on. And sometimes it's that you get to build a brotherhood. Sometimes it's that you get to revamp a business. Sometimes you get to pivot. Sometimes you get to leave a relationship. Sometimes it's that you are missing a piece of spirituality that you've been rejecting. You get to lean into that. Whatever it is, it's going to show you back. And the resistance to that is futile, because you'll come to a point where you're like, I give up, I take a knee, and then everything starts working out. So if you're feeling like you know better or it's somebody else's fault or whatever, regardless of how much evidence you have to prove that that might really be the case, it doesn't help you to lean into that. The invitation is presence in your current moment so that you can see and feel, well, what is this showing me? What am I trying to experience that I'm not ready for? Where do my capacities need to increase? What am I missing? Who do I need to learn from? Who do I need to know? Resources. It's not just money, it's time and attention, like ability to focus. There's a bunch of stuff and it will show you. But we get too attached, our ego gets too attached to thinking that, like, well, I've already got it figured out. I shouldn't have any discomfort. Life shouldn't be painful. And my understanding and my belief is that the purpose of life is expansion. It's to always get better. And so if the purpose of life is expansion, that means that a key part of that is the discomfort of expansion, growing pains. So you get used to the discomfort, then you don't have to deal with it as much, because then you can hedge against it. You can provide yourself peace and rest. You can do the things that are necessary, so you got a reprieve, but then you head back in. And I think that's more kind of to bring in the Tim Grover conversation. I think that's more what Tim was talking about. So like living with discomfort for the sake of the result so that you can get it, and being okay with that. And like with everything, when you experience something long enough, it becomes normal, whether it's good or bad. And so you just got to kind of get used to it.
No, again, that was an amazing answer. And my mind goes back to this because you mentioned something at the beginning. When did you first start challenging the beliefs that you inherited? Because it sounds like from the conversation we've had, and I know I've gone through this, I was taught things when I was younger, but as I grew, tested, went through the suck, built my strength up, built who I was, I started challenging those beliefs to get the ones that are actually authentic to me. So when did that pivot, or has it just been a pivot? Like, I know in my life it's been a pivot after pivot after pivot with it, or maybe more awareness might be the right word.
Well, there's been several sort of tower moments that I've had throughout my life that have been like aha. I was like, oh wow. But the biggest and most impactful one, I think, was the very first one. And the short version of that is that when I got divorced from my first wife, as I shared at the beginning, I used to be an active member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I was a Mormon. And when I got divorced and separated, I was excommunicated from that church. Like, they did not, like, that's a process where they say you can't be a member of the church anymore. If you go to the church, you can't pray, you can't participate. You have to go through this whole process to be reinstated back in as a member. And it's very for somebody that had made so much of my identity about the kudos and the attaboys of being a good person through the lens of that church and the behavior that it requires, when I got excommunicated, it was really rocking my identity and who I thought I was. And there was a time where I was like, God threw me away. I don't have anything left. Like, I did the wrong things. And in retrospect, as I look back at my behavior, it was so inconsequential in the bigger picture of things that it was kind of stupid. Like, as I look back, I kind of laugh at how much weight I had given on that time in my life. But one of the things that happened to me during that time is that I had this quandary, and I was introduced to a book that was called Conversations with God by Neil Donald Walsh. And Conversations with God is a very peculiar book because the story behind it is that the author used to have this habit where when he was offended or in difficult situations, he would write a letter to that person or situation as a therapeutic way to release the negativity. So like if he got in a fight with his wife, he'd write his wife a letter and then he would chuck the letter. It was just an exercise to get it out of himself. And at this time, when he wrote the book, he was in his 50s. He had a broken neck. He was basically homeless, living on a couch of his buddy's life. He was estranged from his kids. His wife hated him. Like, he was in this horrible place. And he wrote a letter to God. And he's like, God, what the fuck, man? Like, I'm a good person. How is this happening? And in the process of the letter, God started responding through him. And so the book reads like a screenplay. It's a letter and a response and a letter. And it so eloquently describes some of the different aspects of spirit and of spirituality and the relationship with God and why we're here. And it gave me cause for pause, where I created a moment for myself where I realized, I don't know what I actually believe. Like, all of these things that I think I believe are from somebody else. They were given to me, and then I just kind of bought in. And at the same time, I recognized I really did have beliefs. There were things that were important to me. And so I went through this process. It took me several days, and it was really introspective. And I was like, well, what do I believe? And I would write it down. I'm like, I really, this I believe. This is a thing. And it allowed me to juxtapose what the church had taught me was beliefs and think, I'm cool with some of these things. Like, that works for me, but these other things are nonsense.
Yep.
And to be comfortable with it. And then to start living in a place like, okay, well, this is what I believe. And then more importantly, to be open to that idea that I don't know what I don't know. So there are going to come into my life things that help me with that. It was shortly after that I was first introduced to the law of attraction, where I read the book, The Secret by Rhonda Byrne. And even though I found that book to be kind of silly and to be really kind of over dramatized in the whole thing, there was something about the idea that, like, what I focus on would expand, and where I give my attention can create more. And that led me to another book that was called The Science of Getting Rich by Wallace D. Wattles, which is a precursor to Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. And these are books where they talk about how your thoughts have power, that there's a creative thing to it. And then that transitioned me into learning about neurolinguistic programming and the power of the subconscious mind and the powers and everything. And so from that point, it's basically that I took this first tower moment of like, I don't know what I believe. What do I believe? And then I just became open. And I started pressure testing these things. Like, if I was taught something and I could prove it to be true, I would believe it. And that seemed to be like a very simple, logical test. If you're going to tell me something and I follow the exact rules that you tell me to experience the thing that you tell me I can experience, and I don't get it, it's kind of bullshit. But if I do, I'll buy in. And that's where, again, it led me to NLP. And I started understanding brain science and the way that our thoughts work and the power of the subconscious, of being a focus agent. And all of a sudden, these concepts like manifesting and the law of attraction, they started to shift to become more scientific to me, where I could understand that, like, this isn't some like fairy dust, rub your crystals in the moonlight crap. Like, there's actual like brain science associated with the experience of life and the frequencies, energies, and creation. And I started to get a real sense of power, not in any way other than just like, I have so much power over my life. And so I started learning down that thing. And so now I'm in this place where I've kind of transitioned to where I feel like I know where to find the source code. And so I can get crazy on the things that I want to try to accomplish for myself by tapping into that. And if it doesn't work, then it doesn't mean the source code's bad. It means that I couldn't make the program work.
Right.
And so that's a different sort of thing. It's not that I'm saying, oh, NLP's crap or the law of attraction's crap. It's like, no, I was a faulty user of it by not handling it in the perfect way. And I've had more times than I can count prove that it works. And quickly and in a nonsensical way sometimes. And like, I can't believe that showed up as quickly as it did. And there's other times where it's a long game. When I talk about the discomfort and the feelingness and the invitation to level yourself up, in NLP, there's this concept called the buffer, where when you get a very clear vision in your mind of something you want to experience or something you want to have, you are putting in motion this focus that your subconscious mind now will pay attention to. And that focus is where the discomfort can come, because it's saying like, bro, you're not able to handle this right now. You're going to need to level up this skill set to be able to get that thing. Mm-hmm. And so when I look at it formulaically right now, my entire perspective about pain and discomfort and growth is different. Mm-hmm. I'm not scared of it anymore, because I know how easily I can transition out of it once I get the learning of what it means, and then I can let it go. So my beliefs changed over time. Mm-hmm. After that one pillar moment where I'm like, I don't know what I believe. And then I started being open to it. And then I got really rigid and like, well, if you're going to present to me something that's real, I want to be able to stress test it and prove it. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And if it does, I'm in. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's a very healthy way to look at a lot of the stuff that we're presented, especially in coaching and a lot of the stuff we do in networking and investing and all the entrepreneur stuff. There's a bunch of ideas out there that work and don't work. And there's also like real world principles that work, like with marketing. Like I can't just think myself into being a better marketer. It requires me to understand the language of marketing and implementation and messaging and all that. So those things merge for me. I can say I want to have a beautifully crafted funnel that attracts all these things as a goal of mine. Well, then I feel the discomfort of like, well, you don't have it now. Do you even know how to write good copy? You need to learn how to do that. Who would be the people to help you? You got to go do that. And the map is different, but it's still just as beautifully scientific combined with magical that it's exciting.
Yeah. Well, and I love how you broke that down, because I've had people on and they talk about the law of manifestation, and I've been in sales and business for a while. And I understand if I have a goal, if I have something, and I'll even play games with myself. If I wanted to sell 100,000 that year, my goal might be 200, because I know if I have a father target, my mind, it works. But they also, like you said, they rub the crystals or whatever. I'm like, okay, that's a little bit weird for me. But I love that you went through that pivotal moment, because I did too. Like I grew up not in the Mormon church, like in a Pentecostal, more charismatic kind of really woo church. And I was like, this just isn't working for me. As I got older and I started to challenge different stuff. And I think you have to challenge it, because how do you become authentically you until you actually know who you are? And this has kind of been the theme of this message throughout the whole thing. Know who you are. Figure out what you want to do, be willing to take risk, and go for it. And at the end of the day, own up to if it goes good or bad. And I think it's simple, but it's hard because everyone wants to shortcut. Before I let you go, though, is there anything that we missed in this conversation that you wanted to leave our listeners with?
Absolutely. I just heard you say something I want to make a distinction with, because it's part of the issue. I heard you talk about know who you are. And that is absolutely required. It includes the getting into the dark corners and the shadowy corners of yourself and figure out what makes you tick. But after you've done that, and after you've gotten a lay of the land of what makes you tick and the good, the bad, and the ugly that's in there, there is a simple transition that I would like to invite you to consider. And that your identity is just who you've been practicing to be. Mm-hmm. That you can become whoever you want to be. You can change. You can shift into somebody new. But the way to do that requires a deep sense of self-awareness first, so that you know what you're changing, so that you have all of your own makeup and DNA, emotionally speaking, to know I want to transition over, which means this darkness is going to shift. That means this lightness is going to shift. It's going to do this over here. And so it's a process of discovery. You first discover and find out who you are. And in the process of that, you realize, oh, I'm who I've been practicing to be, even without my knowledge. And I'm blaming it on my parenting and my religious upbringing and these other things. I am not beholden to that at all. I can choose something absolutely different. And then from that point, the invitation is there to be present. But okay, so what does that mean then? Who do I want to become? What do I want to experience? If I have these audaciously big goals, okay, who's the person that could hold on to that goal? What are the skill sets I'm missing? Who are the people that I need to meet? What are the resources I'm lacking? What are this? All of that. And that's the other half of the equation. Absolutely get to know yourself. And what's going to happen is you're going to find parts of it that you don't like. Mm-hmm. And that's okay. Embrace that. Give that version of yourself a proverbial hug. Like, it's okay, man. I get it. And then through the unification of that, you can then change it all. But the process is very like simply, it's simple, but you can't overlook that. Until you know yourself, you can't change yourself.
Yeah, no, I love that. Bryce, thank you for being on. And all of you listening, you know there's someone that needs to hear this. You need to rewind this and apply it to your life, because you build a life that you love living by the choices you make, by the decisions you do, and by the people you surround yourself with. So until next time, go and start making a life that you want to live.